Ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned into another episode of the Paul Leslie Hour. And now your host, Paul Leslie.
Hey, it's me. Okay, folks, I'm glad you're with us because this is one for the books. You're plugged into the John Clayton episode. Welcome to it. If I had to categorize John Clayton, I couldn't. He's known as one of the great bassists in all genres. He's a composer, arranger, conductor, producer, an educator, recording and performing artist, and the greatest artists have collaborated with him. A short list would include Paul McCartney, Diana Krall, Gladys Knight, Dee Dee Bridgewater, Charles Aznavour, Rosemary Clooney, Etta James. We're talking about the cream. He co-founded the Clayton-Hamilton Jazz Orchestra, and with his brother, Jeff Clayton, the Clayton Brothers Quintet. So, John Clayton, it's an honor to have you as a guest. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm feeling great. I'm thinking you left off. I do windows. That's an important part of my bio there. I just want to make sure I got that in. But I'm doing great. You know, I'm just like everybody, sort of getting through the times here. But I've sort of have gone through a couple of phases. I don't know about you, but I went through the sort of the I call it the chill phase, where after my concerts were canceled and I had to come home, I didn't beat myself up. I just thought, okay, just chill, relax, leave it. And then I after a couple of weeks of that, I went through what I call the lazy phase, where I should have been doing things, I just wasn't doing them. And so now I'm hopefully more in the productive stage of things. So that's what's been going on in my life.
I have to say, that is pretty much the exact same cycle that I've been going through.
Funny. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. So I'm hoping you can take us back a little bit. If we could be not a fly on the wall, but something with maybe a little better of ears. If we were hearing any given day in your house when you were growing up, what would we hear?
I don't think I've ever been asked that question. I just flashed on, my youth. I'm the oldest of 7.
Wow. And
my mom, she's still around, but she's got a great sense of humor. She named all of us with names that begin with the letter J. So it's in our household, it was Johnny, Jeffrey, Janine, Joseph, Jerome, Jennifer, Joy. So on any given day, you'd hear my mom say, boy, put that thing down. So that was kind of, along with that, of course, my mom, she led and directed the church choir. So she played piano. So we could hear her practicing her gospel music. And sometimes there would be people from the church would come by and rehearse with her. And so but the music that we listened to on the radio was always soul, R&B music. So I grew up listening to, Little Stevie Wonder and the Temptations and the Four Tops and the Supremes and Gladys Knight and on and on. That was the kind of music that I grew up listening to. And it was not until junior high school that I heard my first jazz, because the high school jazz band, big band, came to our school to do an assembly. So that's the first time I'd ever heard jazz sounds in person, live. So So our house, that was kind of our household. Basically, my mom trying to corral us and some music in between.
And as you said, jazz sounds. What did you think the first time you heard this music? Okay, so this is jazz.
I don't even know that's a good question. I don't know if I realized, I don't think I defined it as such. I imagine they told us it was jazz, but it was the high school big band playing an assembly, playing some jazz tunes, big band jazz tunes. And that was the first time I'd heard an ensemble like that. And I was hoping that, because I just started bass then, and taking beginning strings in junior high school. And I thought, I hope I'm good enough once I get to high school to audition for that band and try playing some of that music. And that was sort of how it all began for me.
So why the bass in particular?
Boy, you're asking great questions. So in junior high school, you get out of elementary school where they tell you what you're going to do. In junior high school, they give you a little ounce of freedom. You actually can choose some classes here. And one of the categories was, the arts. And I could choose a music class. I could choose choir. I could choose whatever. So in the arts, and I walked into the band room, enjoying music, and looked around, and I met the band director, and he said, "What would you like to play?" And I said, "Oh, wow." And I looked around, and I saw this big thing hanging on the wall. I said, "Can I play that?" And he said, "Sure." And he wrote down my name and wrote tuba. And then as I was walking out the doors, I saw these 4 gorgeous brown things standing in a corner. I said, "Ooh, can I play that instead?" And I always like to say he crossed off tuba and wrote down my destiny. The great Billy Higgins, jazz drummer, used to say, "You don't choose the instrument chooses you." And that was definitely the case with me, because I didn't even know how it sounded, but I had to play it.
Fascinating. You were truly destined to be a bassist.
I guess so.
I want to go back to the gospel music that you mentioned. What do you think about gospel music?
Yeah. I don't even think I think anything about it. I think that it's just part of my lifeblood. I grew up playing it. It's like breathing. I'm as comfortable playing or listening to gospel music as anything else that I do in life, eating and breathing. So yeah, I love it. I love it. It's gospel music not only introduced me to a music that I'd hear in church, but all of the things that are attached to it. Sacred music allows you to express a certain part of your spirit, of your religion, your belief, that other music may not, at least not in the same way. Definitely if it has secular lyrics versus sacred lyrics, but so just to be in church every Sunday and feel that spirit coming through all of the parishioners is something that obviously affected me and everybody in the church, and all of my brothers and sisters the same way. Not 2 of the 7, my brother Jeff and myself, are professional musicians, but that music affected all of us.
So you would say that there is definitely a spiritual aspect to what you do.
There's a spiritual aspect to music, period.
Mm-hmm.
I will often explain to students, music is sound, and there are different kinds of sounds. You can clap your hands, you can stomp your feet, jump up and down, knock on a door, bang on a trash can lid. You can, there's so many sounds around us. The difference between those sounds and the sounds that you make as a musician, I'll remind them, is that when you make a sound with music, you attach your soul to that sound. That's the difference. Music is sound, but it's not just a sound. It's not just banging your hands on the keys of the piano. You really are, there's the technical part of it where you're trying to figure out the notes to touch. But there's the other part of it, which you can't see. It's not tangible, but you can definitely feel it. You and I, all of us, have been to many, many concerts where we feel something coming off the stage. It's not just sound. We feel that musician's soul being attached to those sounds. Singers can do it perhaps more, one could argue, perhaps more obviously, more evidently, because they might be singing a lyric that they really express in a way that helps you to feel what they're feeling, but that's anybody who does music. You can express whatever you want through music. Sure, you can choose to detach yourself from the music and just make sounds. That's boring. Nobody wants to do that.
Well, what would you say amongst all those things that I listed you do, from performing, going into the studio to make a recording, composing music, arranging, what are you happiest doing?
That's almost like asking me, do I love my son Gerald or daughter Gina one more than the other? It's that they're that attached, and I'm not trying to, evade the answer. Well, I think the biggest challenge for me, again, I don't know, maybe this is another area of the question, but the biggest challenge for me is balance, because I love playing bass so much that when I am playing a lot of bass, it's as if there's a little me on my left shoulder that goes, call yourself a composer, huh? Why aren't you composing? And then if I'm in the middle of a writing project, then, that me is on the other shoulder going, call yourself a bass player, huh? How come you're not playing bass? So I'm constantly trying to find the balance that lets me kind of ride that wave of all of the things that I love doing. And I think that most artists that I know are like that.
Other than just the enjoyment that people get from hearing music, is there a greater purpose to your work?
A conscious greater purpose sometimes. So, for instance, if I write a piece that is to reflect some social political frustration that I'm feeling, then that's the purpose. That's part of the purpose that music could serve. Somebody may not pick up on that. They may just connect with it or not, connect with it in other ways, and then not really get that social political message. And then, so that's the conscious way. There are other times, I think most times, when I play and I'm expressing myself and I'm having fun with the music, the people will connect with your music in different ways, on different levels, and it'll mean different things to them. It'll be the same music, but it could even be music that you're playing that has lyrics to it, that has words to it. And people are going to get different messages from that same set of lyrics, depending on who they are, what their experiences are, what they might be going through at any given moment. There's a wonderful, just small example of that. A great jazz singer named Carmen McRae did a song that Alan and Marilyn Bergman wrote, and there didn't seem to be a melody, but there was music underneath this text that Carmen McRae recited, and it was so moving to me. I mean, I fell in love with that thing, and it talks about a married couple, and one of the married couple is reflecting and saying, who said you could go? Who gave you permission? We agreed that we'd grow old together. How could you do this to me? And I just imagine, at that time in my life, I was seeing so many people getting divorced and separating from their partners. that's where my head went. But of course, and I told Alan Bergman that is such an amazing piece of music. And just, to imagine that couple sort of divorcing. And he said, oh, it's not about divorce. It's about loss. It's about death. So there is something that was clear in his mind when they wrote it, he and his wife, Marilyn. And I, like everybody else, heard this, but my experiences took me to all of that to say, that's what music does. So when I'm expressing myself through this music, it's going to touch people in different ways. And there will be people that it will not even touch, that will listen to it and will not find a connection to it. And that's just fine. That's normal.
Who would you say the great bass players are, both from the past and the ones that are still with us, all in all?
Woo! How long is your show? Well, okay. To me, personally, especially the people that have affected me and my music, we'd have to start with Ray Brown, great jazz bass player, who, of course, played with Oscar Peterson for so many years and played with people like Louis Armstrong and Frank Sinatra and Count Basie and Duke Ellington and, with Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker. And it's endless. And he was the first jazz bass player I discovered on recordings. And coincidentally, he happened to, at that time, live in Los Angeles. And coincidentally, he was giving a one-semester course at UCLA called Workshop in Jazz Bass. Even though I was 16 years old, it was an extension course. And I immediately stopped my newly begun classical lessons so I could save $65 to take that course with Ray Brown. And of course, he and I went on to become very close. So at the top of the list will be Ray Brown. But Ray Brown is the guy who helped introduce me to names like Charles Mingus, Milt Hinton, Paul Chambers, Israel Crosby, Ron Carter, Eddie Gomez, Scott LaFaro, Richard Davis, on and on and on. And also, those are kind of in the jazz world. Many of those people are gone, not all of them. But and then the bass players that are still with us doing great things, that's also a long list, thank goodness. People like John Patitucci, Christian McBride, my little brother, I call him. We actually had a group together with Christian McBride, Ray Brown, and myself that Ray Brown called Super Bass. So many other great, Ben Williams is a great young bass player, Joe Sanders, John Hamer, a guy named Christoph Ludi. I just got a very long list on both ends of that spectrum, which is so encouraging because I love the fact that more and more people are developing their good taste and discovering the bass and allowing themselves to use it as a tool for expression.
I'm curious to know what you think about the bass as a solo instrument. We had a young bass player named Benjamin Ryan Williams who came into our studio, and he performed all of these solo bass songs, and they were incredible. What do you think about the bass just when it's by itself?
I can't say anything negative about that because it's something that I often do. So I do love it. And the first person I ever heard do an unaccompanied solo where he played on bass the melody and accompanied himself so that you could also hear the underlying harmonies that went along with that melody was Ray Brown. But other people have done it also beautifully. People like Oscar Pettiford in the old days. Again, Milt Hinton was an important person for that. Jimmy Blanton also. So yeah, they paved the way for my generation, and then of course this younger generation that Ben Williams represents paved the way for us to really explore that. People like Charlie Hayden would do that. I just went, there's my mind just went to that senior place. We call it Jazzheimers. And oh gosh, he's an English bass player. He played with Miles Davis. He'll come to me, but he also, this when I come on the name, all of your listeners are going, oh yeah, so and so. But anyway, when just so many people have done beautiful things with the bass as a solo instrument, and that's not only pizzicato, plucking the strings, but that's also arco, playing it with the bow. And I like to do both. I like to do a combination.
At the beginning of the show, I listed a lot of the well-known recording artists that you've worked with in the studio and on stage. And I'm curious to know, from that list, who really, really knocked you out when it came to you worked with them and you thought, wow, this is a creative genius. I'm sure there's a couple, but who comes to your mind first?
Creative genius. A creative genius. That's a pretty strong phrase. If I were to use that, I would have to say Paul McCartney. But as much as I admire his endless musicality, I was blown away by his humility. He, for instance, we would put the arrangements together as a group. When we would walk in, I don't know if that experience, just to back up a little bit, Paul McCartney grew up in a household of jazz. His dad was a big band jazz drummer. So here he is, 70 years old plus, and he, I imagine it ran through his mind, if I don't have a chance to do that music, sing those songs now, when will I ever? So he took those American standards, many of which he'd heard growing up, and decided to do this record. So that was his project. Diana Krall played piano, and she was kind of the music director. And the thing that I was blown away by with Paul McCartney is he would walk in the studio, and he was so kind, and he'd say to us as we were trying to figure out treatment for a song, he'd walk to the piano and play something, and he'd say, guys, I don't know what you call this, but this is the sound I'm looking for. And I thought, what an admirable, open, humble man this is, that he, because, as you kind of alluded to, I've worked with a lot of people. Seldom have I seen people of that stature with that much accomplished who would also say things like, I don't know what this is called. I don't know what this chord is called. I don't know what this sound is, theoretically, how you refer to this. And that really struck me, that he was the brilliant musician he is, yet he didn't have any qualms about admitting things that he didn't know.
That is really, really something. And that album, Kisses on the Bottom, the Paul McCartney album, I happen to love that album a great deal.
Oh, great.
What do you think it is about these songs? Is it possible to put it into words? What makes their enduring quality? They've been around for so long, and yet it seems like everybody who is a singer, whether it's Paul McCartney or it's Bob Dylan or James Taylor, eventually you get around to the Great American Songbook.
I think that, sure, I understand the elements, being one of millions of musicians on the planet. I've studied, I know how to talk about the theory and the components, the elements, I can talk about it on that level. And also I feel the music. I love how it sounds. I love how it feels. I can talk about it and feel it on that level as well. But There's something inexplicable about music, something magical that draws all of us in. And if one could define what it was that makes a song great, then that's all that everyone would do. So if you understand it on a theoretical level and it became a hit song for you or for somebody else, then you go, okay, I've got to do that again. I think most musicians have tried that. It never works. Never works. Because the audience, again, like you, there's something subliminal about this, something intuitive about this music that just feels right, just pushes a button in you at the right time. I mean, for instance, you may remember, I know I did when I did the arrangement for Whitney Houston on the Star Spangled Banner, there's no way that any of us could have predicted that it would have done what it did. I had to set the stage for her to do her thing, but knock on wood, my thoughts, my fantasies about, I wonder what would happen if we did this. And I can imagine Whitney sort of soaring here and taking it down to a much mellower, introverted sort of place here. Luckily, she connected with my musical concept, and timing-wise, we were going through an unfortunate time. We were going through the Gulf War. Everybody's feelings of nationalism, patriotism was really high. So put it all together. So if someone were to say, oh, well, if you want to write a successful arrangement of the Star Spangled Banner, just, follow John Clayton's lead and to kind of do what he did, and then you'll score, just do all that stuff and you'll get a home run. It doesn't work like that. So if it did, we just all follow those rules and we build the same looking house every time.
What was Whitney Houston like to be around?
Oddly enough, I only got to be around her one time, and it was after we did the Star Spangled Banner. So we did the Star Spangled Banner separately together. I wrote the arrangement for the orchestra, and my dear friend Ricky Minor, who was also her music director at the time, went to meet the orchestra and rehearse them and record the track in Florida. And then he and I spoke later about things. But and then Whitney, of course, as I recall, I think she had to make some kind of a track for herself. When you're in a stadium like that, you really need to have some kind of monitor situation that's close to you, because the delay in a stadium that's that big can be really confusing. So, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, but I think that she had to do a version of it in the studio before the game, but she did sing it live. She sang it live to the track that the orchestra had recorded earlier, and the orchestra was on the field faking it, but the track was already pre-recorded. So I didn't get to meet Whitney until afterwards, and we were in the same studio together, and Ricky was there, and Ricky saw me and he said, "Hey, good to see you. You've never met Whitney, have you?" And I said, "Actually, no." So then I went to the studio where she was, and I said, "It's great to finally meet you. We've been working together," and we laughed, and it was a touching moment, and I really enjoyed it, but I didn't know her beyond that.
I had an interview one time with Frank Sinatra Jr., and I asked him, who does the best job at singing the classic American songs? And he said, the first person on that list would have to be Diana Krall. And you've worked with her and recorded with her. What do you think it is? What is Diana Krall's greatest talent?
That's also a hard one because it's hard to single out one thing. She's sensitive and soulful. I love that about her singing and her playing. She plays great jazz piano. In fact, when she was 19 years old, she moved to Los Angeles to focus on playing jazz piano and learning jazz trio playing with Jeff Hamilton and myself. She also came here to study with Jimmy Rolls, the great jazz piano player, and Alan Broadbent. So we were kind of her little team, if you will. And she was this kid, this teenager that was in love with the music that we were all doing. And I actually didn't know that she sang. She focused on piano playing when she was here in the beginning. Even then, we became good friends. She was our babysitter for a while. She would get a gig in the lobby of a local hotel or something like that, and I'd occasionally play with her. And we always were working on repertoire and teaching her about how to give cues and signals when you're playing piano. And then it was during that playing, a little concert or little gigs here and there with her, that I heard her sing. And it was just sort of, if you will, I hate to phrase it that way, but it's almost like lounge singer. She'd sing fine. It was in tune. It was cool. No problem. But her style was developing. And the style that we recognize now was in its infancy when she was here in Los Angeles in the beginning. So her piano playing is really a strong suit for her. Her singing, obviously, a really strong suit. And the way she is able to allow her influences to be absorbed. There are people that I know have influenced her greatly because I know her so well. But if you hear her, you hear Diana Krall. If you analyze her, you can hear the influences. And that would include someone like Ernestine Anderson, a vocalist, jazz vocalist that many people, if you're not in the jazz world, you may not know that name. But you'd add to that, of course, Frank Sinatra. She talked a lot about Frank, listened a lot to Frank Sinatra. Tony Bennett, Rosemary Clooney, a huge influence on her singing and her work. I mean, there's a long list. But likewise with the piano playing. Monty Alexander, my former employer, Oscar Peterson, Ahmed Jamal, on and on. So yeah, Diana Krall's, I don't know how to sort of boil it down to a single most thing that she really does well.
I want to call the attention to the audience to your website. It's very much a listening experience. It's johnclaytonjazz.com. And if they go over to the Clayton Brothers in particular, I've been listening to some very interesting songs, very good material there. When you work with people that you're related to, is there a kind of commonality? Is it more relaxing? What's that like?
Good question. Yes, there is something there. But when we're playing music, whatever that is, takes a back seat. And really, it's still there. It's still an important layer, but it's not as close to the surface. People will hear me play with my son, for instance, and I always hear the same thing. Oh, I can really see the pride on your face when you're playing. And, I won't deny that. I guess something's happening, but I don't think of him as my son when we're playing. He's just another piano player. We're playing music. We're focused and connecting and expressing together. It's only after we're done that I kind of go, oh yeah, that's my kid. And it's the same thing with my brother. If I'm playing music with my brother, when we're playing, he's not my brother. He's this musician that I'm enjoying playing music with. There will be times that he'll do things that are really familiar to me because it might reflect a couple of bars or a phrase that we used to sing in church every Sunday. That kind of connection where it's really personal, private to us, that only family members would recognize, kind of thing. So that's the way it kind of works with me. I absolutely admit that there is a connection there, a familial thing that is different than when I play with other people. But when we're actually making music, the music is the focus. And I don't even, you're in the zone. You don't really, the people that you're playing with shed their personalities, and they become, like you, vehicles for the music.
I'm hoping you can tell us about the Clayton-Hamilton Jazz Orchestra. How was that formed?
Well, Jeff Hamilton, my dear friend, I met Jeff Hamilton when I went to Indiana University, and he was the country rat and I was the city rat. I came from LA and he was from Richmond, Indiana. We're both going to IU, and we discovered each other, and we played a gig together as students. And at the end of the gig, he said to me, can I just talk to you for a while? So we had a break, and he said, I just want to know, you've studied with Ray Brown. You've already done a bunch of stuff. You're working with Henry Mancini. How do you get better? How do you get so you can accomplish these things? And I said, I was 20 years old or whatever, 19 years old. I said, I don't know. I just know that, I look at who you want to play with. I said, well, who do you want to play with? I asked him. And he said, well, Oscar Peterson, Woody Herman, Ella Fitzgerald. And I just looked at him and said, then you will. And I said, so how many Woody Herman records do you have? He said, I think I got about 3. I said, you need to have 30. How many Oscar Peterson records do you have? 5. I said, you need to have 50. And you got to learn them all and learn every song. Just immerse yourself in that. And when you meet them, let them know how much you love their music and it's your dream to play with them. Anyway, that was sort of our beginning. So Jeff Hamilton and I became best friends, still are. We left Indiana University and went on the road with Monty Alexander for 2 years. Jeff left to go with Woody Herman. And then I left to go with Count Basie. The years go by. I moved to Holland to be with my then girlfriend, now wife. I played in the symphony orchestra, blah, blah, blah. Jeff and I are still in touch. He went on to move to Los Angeles and play with Ray Brown in a group called the LA Four. The whole time we were in touch, I'm writing more and more as a result of my Basie days. And we just at some point said, what do you think about getting a band together at some point? And I said, yeah, that sounds awesome to me. So when I finally moved to Los Angeles, that was the end of 1984, we decided to move on this. So Jeff Hamilton and my brother and myself put this band together. My brother had lived in LA the whole time. He's a professional musician here, and he knew all the right people. He knew the ins and outs of these people. He knew them personally very well. So he said, well, if you're going to call this guy, you better call this guy as well. And, it was kind of that sort of a deal. So my brother put the band together. I was responsible for the music, for the, compositions, arrangements. And Jeff Hamilton handled the finances, which basically meant that for quite a long time, Jeff Hamilton didn't have a hell of a thing to do the whole time because we weren't making any money at all. But that's how it all began. And here it is. That was in 1985. And here we are in 2020, and we've been together ever since. In fact, we still have people in the band that were at that first rehearsal, because we really don't fire anybody. Our thing is, if you're in the band, you're in this family, and you either choose to quit or die. That's how you leave.
You don't let them leave.
Yeah, they leave if they want to, but we're not going to fire them.
Is there any dream project or anything that you're really hoping to accomplish, or maybe someone that you really want to collaborate with? Is there anything like that you can tell us about?
Two people that were on my bucket list to play with that I didn't have a chance to play with. They're still alive, but they're pretty much semi-retired or semi-retired. One is Sonny Rollins, and the other is Ahmad Jamal. And love their music so much, and had always hoped I'd have a chance to do something with them, but it never happened. But that's fine too, because I am a lucky guy. I'm a blessed guy, and I've made and continue to make so much music that I'm quite happy. That's one of the things that I would always dreamed of. I was just listening 2 days ago to Sonny Rollins' record called Way Out West, with Sonny Rollins with Ray Brown and Shelly Manne on drums. And Ray Brown's bass playing is phenomenal. Sonny Rollins' sax playing is just to die for. And, and Ahmad Jamal, I still play along with his recordings as just because it's fun, and it's also a great way for me to warm up. So those are two biggies. And other than that, I've got other projects that I'm creating and looking forward to. I want to do the next chapter of something duo with my son. I want to do record another Clayton-Hamilton Jazz Orchestra record. I'm also looking forward to writing more large pieces. I've been kind of doing a bit of that lately. I really enjoy it. Pieces that are more than one movement kind of deal, and that often they're usually about 30 or 40 minutes in length. Not that I need to write a long piece, but just, if I have a project like that, there might be something that I really want to develop and help evolve. So, yeah, there are plenty of things. I'd like to do bass tips and kind of make them accessible to people for free, put them on my website and that sort of thing. So I want to continue with making some more bass tips. I'll hear young bass players that are searching and looking for some guidance, and I'll do what I can to help them. So yeah, there are always things for me to do and look forward to.
And we have a lot to look forward to in terms of things to listen to and to look out for. What would you say is the best thing about being John Clayton? That I get to feel and enjoy and thrive from other people's energy. It's just something I love, that the fact that I can play music with other people and communicate with them in that way just makes me love life. That I can have a conversation with someone and connect with them and have that kind of exchange is really cool for me. That I can tell jokes with my friends and just laugh on the same level. That whole, just people give energy, and whether that energy is coming through music or a story or whatever, that floats my boat. That makes me come alive. That makes me realize just how special my life is. Well, I can tell you that doing this interview with you, I immediately felt an incredible tranquility. I just felt completely relaxed from the moment you started to talk.
Wow, thank you.
All the listeners, they can check out johnclaytonjazz.com. And I always like to close the show. I like to give the microphone to the guest. I like to let them go wherever they want. What would you say to those folks who are tuned in with us?
Oh, sometimes I will tell my friends, I'll tell my students that I think that it's really important for us all to follow our hearts. Follow your heart. You can't go wrong if you follow your heart. You know, if you don't follow your heart, you always have regrets. You know, something told me I shouldn't have done that. But every time you follow your heart, even in, I tell them, even in relationships, you're finally able to date that person that you've always wanted to date, and you feel good about it, and he or she feels good about it. Even if that relationship ends, at the end of the day, you're going to go, well, it had to end, I guess, but God, we had some good times. You don't regret following your heart, and that's every step of the way. Career choice. I know there are people that can make choices, and other people either can't make choices or maybe can make more limited choices. So I think, my mom's a perfect example of somebody who made really great choices, but she had 7 kids and she was pretty much a single parent. And so, I feel like she did what she needed to do in order for me to be able to make choices, to follow my heart, So if I don't follow my heart, shame on me. After all that my mom, after all my community did to allow me and help me to be in a position to make those choices. So I think follow your heart would be the big message I'd like to share with everyone.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being with us and for the thought that you put into these answers. It's been a great pleasure.
It was my pleasure, Paul. Thanks so much for inviting me.
It's an honor. Okay, sir. Well, again, I appreciate it, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
You too. So great to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to the Paul Leslie Hour. Hosted, written, and produced by Paul Leslie. Intro theme song, Alexander's Ragtime Band, written by Irving Berlin, performed by Dan Barrett. Outro scatting G Things, improvised, performed, and produced by John Goodwin. Until next time.
Goodbye.